Hi everybody, my name is Jeremy Siskin. I'm the author of Playing Solo Jazz Piano and the Jazz Piano Fundamental series. Check them out, jeremysiskin.com or Amazon, wherever great books are sold. So, if you've been following this channel for a little while, you might know that I am obsessed with the vocalist Norma Winstone. I've been checking out her new album, Outpost of Dreams, which features Kit Downs. I did a little transcription of Kit Downs that I showed on a previous video. And today, I am interviewing brilliant British pianist now living in Berlin, Kit Downs. We talked a lot about this one track off of the Norma Winstone album. I asked him about his transcription, about how they thought about it, how they approached it. I also, tried to direct the conversation towards playing a little bit more outside of the changes. And he talks about getting outside of the verticality of harmony, like getting outside of this like A major chord equals A major scale kind of a feeling. And so I think a lot of what he had to say was really valuable. He did not have good audio going on, but fortunately had the foresight to record directly, which means that I did some video editing to make sure that the sound was good. So you will hear some moments where, he's using his microphone and I don't sound as good, and then I'm using my microphone and he doesn't sound quite as good, but I did edit it so that everything is really understandable. I think you're going to have no problem understanding a single word that anybody says. Next time I'll ask him to wear headphones. Lesson learned. But I don't think it will prevent you from enjoying the video at all. Just know that I am aware, and I did a bunch of editing. I actually spent a long time trying to edit so that you could really hear every word that he says. So this is a long video. You might want to watch it while you're doing something else. But I hope you really enjoy my interview with Kit Downs. All right. Hi, everybody. This is Jeremy Siskin, and I'm here with a brand new friend, Kit Downs. And Kit's in Berlin right now. I'm in California. I completely cold call emailed you like a week and a half ago, right? We don't know each other at all. But I've been just like loving the way that you play piano on this recent collaboration with Norma Winstone called Outpost of Dreams. Do I have that right?
That's right.
And so I just wanted to invite you on. I've transcribed a little bit of your playing. I thought we could listen to this track, Jesus Maria, Carla Bley composition, and then maybe I can pick your brain about it a little bit. Do you want to say anything about this composition or about this tune or recording before we listen to it?
Just that the main reference was this Trio 64 record with Paul Bley playing piano and Jufrey playing clarinet and
Steve Swallow, right?
Yeah, right. And Jimmy Jufrey has been someone that I was into for all these different periods that he was playing. And this band particularly, I loved very much the way Paul Bley treated Carla Bley's tunes. I mean, their connection is beautiful.
Right.
How he treats their melodies and things. So, go on. Is the audio too bad?
No. It's all good.
Okay.
I was gonna say it was interesting because I did listen to that recording once I figured out this was a Carla Bley tune, and it's interesting because like they kind of swing it
Right.
a bunch, and yours like comes through a little bit. I have her original lead sheet here, and it comes a little closer to the original lead sheet, and it like almost has a habanera like tango-y, like the Spanish part of the Jesus Maria reference. And then I was curious too, because it seems like Carla Bley or somebody wrote a lyric to this, but then Norma, as she so incredibly does, like wrote her own lyric. And did that change anything? Her lyrics are so mysterious. Did you guys talk about like what it's about or anything like that?
Actually, in general, with Norma, both me and her just leave each other to do our bit of it, and we don't really talk about any of that stuff. It's a kind of old school thing that I really like, is not telling each other, or not really interfering too much in terms of each individual's process and what their sound is and what their approach is, especially with just a duo collaboration. I think we just let each other make our own strong choices and just trust that it will play out the way it plays out. And I mean, something that I love very much about her, I mean, maybe this is something we can talk about later, but it's definitely the biggest appeal of playing with Norma is this thing that she embraces risk so much in such a cool very free way, even though aesthetically the stuff she does isn't always within that sound world of free music. The spirit and the intention very much is like, let's make something happen. She always says, let's jump off a cliff together and see how we land, you know. And I love that also. And a lot of the people that are important to me musically have the same approach. So I guess this whole record was in that vein, really. A lot of very new material that we hadn't toured it at all or anything like that. And we just met for 2 days and embraced whatever came out and decided to just whatever was ugly, whatever was pretty, whatever worked, whatever didn't, was all like part of the relationship that we had together. So
nice. I love it. And I feel like there's like the ugly pretty thing in this Carla Bley composition. Like some of it is really melodic and beautiful, and then she's like on these weird fourths, like you know, against the melody, like you know, consciously leaning into some of that dissonance. And you do that as well. So I want to play the track now, and then for those watching, listening on the screen, you'll see my little transcription of the introduction, which I apologize, I kind of did it haphazardly. I'm sure the rhythms and stuff are going to be off. And then I'll put up Carla Bley's original lead sheet, and you guys did it in the original key, which is awesome. I love it. Okay, so I'm going to try to make the tech work here. Let's see if it happens. I think you'll be able to hear it on your end as well. Okay.
Soundings, distant murmurs, he can feel them all. Nowhere, maybe somewhere, tuning into lives. As the seasons turn and life goes on, he's still a man that's like no other. He will always know things we never know. Waiting out our time, caught in the shadows, whispered voices as the day arrives. Faint hearts can be heroes if they can believe. Worlds turned upside down, still he's always
Yeah, beautiful. Those- I love those last few little major chords. What comes to mind as you're hearing that?
I guess like if I'm sort of thinking about some of the games that I was playing with the tune and how to accompany Norma, it's like a lot of triads. And I was thinking as I was playing, I think I play a lot of triads anyway. I play a lot of church organ music, and clusters are very hard to pull off on the church organ because there's so many overtones and partials, and the way that you get volume on the instrument is to stack other instruments on top of each other. So you would have like a 8-foot pipe, 4-foot, 2-foot, and they all play like the root, and then the octave, and then the octave, and then the fifth, and then the seventh of that. And that's all when you just press C. So when you start playing clusters on the keyboard, it gets very, very dense very quickly. So I think when I started playing organ in an improvised context more frequently, which is about 10, 15 years ago, it changed the way that my left hand comped myself. And it also coincided at a time where I wanted to break this this kind of vertical harmony thing that I'd studied and learned a lot at college, where there's a chord written in a bar, and the idea that it's like you've got a scale that fits that and certain voices that fits that, and it all comes as a rule for the length of that bar. And I wanted to embrace kind of the chaos of counterpoint a bit more. And when I think of linking that up with the way that the tune is written anyway, with these triads and then these strong diatonic melodies, but just in alternate keys to the one that they're being comped in. That also, this tune works great on organ for that reason, because everything is so clearly when it's dissonant, it's very clearly dissonant, and it's still very diatonic in its dissonance. It's just that there are two things going on at once, or three things, or shadows of things that have crossed the bar earlier. A key center that's referenced in the melody from a bar before then changes somewhere else. So in that way, it's actually very transparent. The abstraction, the melodic and harmonic abstraction is very transparent, I think, which makes it ripe for kind of playing whatever you want, basically. And especially because you have these kind of 2-bar cells a lot of the time, this A major 7 and then a B over E. And that's just a loop. And the melody itself is very strongly in A at that point.
Yeah, and so just for people watching, you're kind of talking about here, at this moment at least.
Yeah.
Maybe it delves into E or B with that D sharp a little bit. So the melody, you feel like is strongly in A, but it's definitely in some sort of a sharp key, without a doubt. And she even writes and notates sharps there. And then the chords are all in a really strong flat key. So, like, does the word bitonality resonate, or you're thinking it more contrapuntally?
Oh, I think definitely by turn that the description fits for sure. And I also like how you just described that thing of like different hands having, in a way, kind of different enharmonic rules. So this idea of like this kind of very blurry view of how you can create kind of bitonality, where like you just look for the opposite. So if you've got a key with 3 sharps, you can just pick a key with the equivalent number of flats, or you go around that sort of C, F, B flat, E flat like cycle, and you just pick the other side of it, the other side of the circle, and you can kind of create.
Okay, I've never quite considered that. So you're saying like if you have F
Not a
major with
chord.
one flat, you could go to G major with one sharp. Is that the kind of thing that you're saying? Maybe.
Loose. Yeah, like, and it's not a rule. It would be like if I hit D flat. I mean, I guess it's a general thing in a way, and your subconscious will pick it. But when you come to, if like in this tune, the left hand changes at one point when it reaches this bridge to D flat major, or D flat with an E flat triad included, the Lydian, and so that brings up like a sort of set of flats. And then if I'm thinking like, how do I want to create something that's that has this feeling of something still connected but not too far away, then I'm going to be looking around the circle of fifths to something that is not too far away, in a way. Like, that's just how the brain works, I think. If you're looking for kind of out information, it's like how out and how far away, in a way.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's kind of occurring to me while you're talking that like flats and sharps aside, you could make an argument for like D flat major on the bottom and C sharp minor on top. It kind of has that feeling too of mixing the major and minor modes, and then of course like that added thing of it's like Lydian on bottom, which
yeah, right. Yeah, so it's like a super bright accompaniment with a minor melody. That's a nicer way of looking at it, to be honest, I think. Yeah.
yeah. But then
kind
he
of-
does kind of kind of gravitate towards those A's as resting places. So the A major or A Lydian, maybe it's D flat Lydian, A Lydian, could make sense.
And I mean, I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of Carla Bley or Paul Bley or any of those people, but if I imagine like a way in, I think so much is like about the ear and like, I mean, chance, embracing like that's a nice, not knowing necessarily why it's such a nice rub. And I mean, for sure, like you could look at it like, I mean, I love that way of thinking about it, that melody is in C sharp minor and it's hitting a flat six. And then the left hand is in like D flat Lydian hitting a sharp four.
Right. It's like a little bit brighter, a little bit darker, like they're kind of pulling away from one another. Oh, that's fun.
But I mean, the only things that I think about when I'm sitting here talking to you, looking at the paper and stuff, like when it comes to the playing, I think one thing that I know I do is look at patterns, because I practice transposition a lot. Transposition of patterns, voicings, tunes, blah, blah, blah. So that you can just, basically for pattern recognition, whether it be voicings, lines, or anything really. And so I know that those games get played. If I play something and I want it to resonate for longer than just the phrase that it's been played, maybe I'll transpose that, maybe not verbatim, but the shell of it with embellishment leading somewhere else. But
could we maybe see if we can find a place in that solo where you do that, so we can know exactly what you're talking about?
Do that. Maybe bar 10 with just the end of that phrase.
Is that right?
It's just, it goes up a third, right? Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure if
Oh,
I
I
do.
see. So it's like, are you hearing those as related-ish? Maybe. Let's look at page 2.
Yeah.
And yeah, I also love this moment just while we're right here. Yeah, I love those triads because I can kind of, I can justify the melody in my mind. Like it's almost an octatonic melody, but then the triads under are doing a totally different thing.
I think I know what this is. Actually kind of a good example of what I'm talking about. Maybe not in terms of melody, but in terms of voicing. Oh, phew! I'm glad I found one.
We got it.
Don't worry, guys. So bar 20. So I have the. I mean, it's quite classic to play like compound triads as like a kind of voice to voice a melody in parallel, right? That's like an upper structure kind of game that you would, if you're writing for trumpets or something like that. But then I obviously can see that I notice halfway through the bar that I can see where the end of the melody is. I can see that I'm going to be needing to get to D flat, and I can already see by the first beat of bar 20 that this phrase is going to end on an E flat. And if I transpose it verbatim, I'm going to have an A flat major triad, which isn't going to work on the D flat 7. So, well, I mean, it could, but I don't want to necessarily change the chord quality. So I can see that halfway through, I decide to switch to minor triads. Do you know what I mean? In order to make that.
Okay. Yeah, so the first two are major, and the second two are minor.
And that's just to make it to D flat 7, like in one piece. But right. You know, I could change it to D flat major 7. In fact, it actually would work at that moment because it's the end of a longer cadence. But it's a strong choice that I don't really want to do. So, I mean, I guess that's something you could call, but it's all very instinctive, really, and it's pretty intuitive. I mean, this kind of major triad game is also like a bit lifted from the Jufrey version. Maybe not maybe triad, but this idea of going like ba da do, like it's a thing that Steve Swallow does in the bass, where he plays like C and B flat as an approach to A. On some of those 2-bar loops in the first section in A major, he does that a couple of times, which is like strongly against the Lydian thing as well, which I like a lot because it's like suddenly it's like a completely different sound to this major warm Lydian thing.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you're describing it as kind of major triads and minor triads, and then I look at, like, for me, if I'm doing, you know, my nerdy analysis, I look at the top part of that and be like, oh, it's G major, E Aeolian, like it kind of did find its way into this traditional mode, but maybe not, you know, that's not what you're thinking. You're not thinking G major over E flat, but that's kind of what it ended up happening in a certain.
Right. I mean, I guess that's a good illustration of this thing of not wanting to see it vertically as like one shape for the whole bar. So it's like, I know what you mean. Like you can see those 4 triads as all part of G major, but I'm definitely not thinking of that. I know myself. I know what I'm. I don't think I'm
that's why we have you here. And then that's kind of interesting that consciously or not, I look at bar 24 as a melodic continuation, right? Kind of has that.
Right.
That same kind of a arc, same kind of a contour.
Yeah. I mean, you probably know more than I do, to be honest.
I definitely know less than you do, but I've had it in front of me for a second. So let's just talk about you. You mentioned getting out of the verticality and into more of a contrapuntal mindset. And obviously that's a like long journey with many twists and turns and steps. But I'm wondering if you can like give a couple of, you know, of thoughts of if somebody wanted to get away from thinking about chords and scales and arpeggios and chord tones and, you know, enclosures or whatever, and start thinking more in this way that's a little bit more open-ended, I think. You know, a little bit more in the Paul Bley, Jimmy Jufrey kind of line of thinking. Like, what would you actually sit down and do in your practice sessions?
I mean, it's you are what you eat kind of thing. So it would really be about listening to music where there's no chords written on the page a lot of the time. So ornette is a big one. Like when I discovered ornette, that was around, well, that was before, but when I started really getting into ornette and the music of Paul Motion and Charlie Hayden and Don Cherry, Dewey Redman, and Paul Bley, hugely Paul Bley, probably at the top of that list. Especially that record Footloose, the trio record, and also that famous record Sonny Meets Hawk, where he plays on All the Things You Are, and this kind of freedom, but while still staying in like form, in kind of tune form. And
And then
also,
would you analyze that, or would you resist analysis and trust your ear?
oh, maybe a bit of both, I guess. But I think it's. I guess I'm looking for like a way that it feels like the way to learn something from that music is to not just like looking at it objectively, what's written on the page if you transcribe it, but trying to get into the mind of the people that make it and why they would make those choices and what those choices really mean, like what the intention is behind it. So I remember reading that book with Paul Bley, the Conversations. I think it's called Conversations, where he talks about freedom of the fingers and embracing like the tactile element of playing piano, what feels good under the hand, and also this allowing like it's a way to allow simplicity into your playing that I like a lot, where it's you focus in on how it feels in the hand, like what shapes feel nice, and I mean it's about is the opposite of what we do the other half of the time, which is like kind of analyzing kind of chord scales and things. So I was looking for a break from that, which I'd done a lot. So I guess I started listening to music where I didn't need to know what the chord was in that bar, which meant like not listening to standards for a while, for example, or like also trying out playing ornette tunes, because I think one of the things with playing music where the chord sequences aren't set, one of the things that's quite confronting for people that are very skilled in playing chord sequences is that suddenly they haven't got that really strong thing that they put loads of hours into to rely on anymore, and you're only basically suddenly you're only as good as the melody that you can come up with in that moment, which is like a big thing of Ornette, right? Like how his melodies are so amazing that like looking into melody, basically I'm guilty of being a piano player and thinking harmonically always first, so this was part of a step of like trying to break that a bit and trying to sort of think as a melodic instrument and taking away that support context of chord sequences. So I'm not saying it very concisely, but I think most of all it was like changing my listening habits, and the things that are comfortable to listen to for me is stuff where I know what the progression is, and I know that that's a clever thing because I know of the implied blah, 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 blah. And what was actually more confronting was to me and more interesting that I learnt more was to listen to music where I didn't know what was making it good or not. And sometimes I didn't even know if it was good or not. So, basically like taking a journey into free music. It is a very broad way of saying it.
That's scary.
But and trying to work out the things that I still liked and not knowing necessarily why it works so well, which is an intangible that's like hard to accept in some cases. Like Paul Bley, for example, that this Footloose solo, I remember taking that down and looking at it, some of it on the page, and I was like, why is that good? Like when I listen to it, does that sound really good? And then I'm looking at it, I'm like, and of course it's got a context and it's got a flow, and the time feel is insane as well. That's like a super important another thing. But yeah, I also was writing music as well. I was composing music that was very kind of chord scale based, and I got fed up with the sound of myself also in my composition. So I started writing tunes without chord symbols, and just kind of trying to think in like top melody, bass line, and maybe a middle part kind of thing. And I just wrote like that for still now most of the time.
So you're really just thinking contrapuntally, what sounds good, where's a resolution point, or just,
right.
Getting out of the chord, deprogramming the chord mindset a little bit.
Yeah, but with the happy knowledge that I know what's going on, and I can insert it. And also if you play with people that have an instinctive intuition about harmony, you'll both put in probably the same stuff or very closely linked stuff, because the same reference points will be buzzing for both of you. So it's there anyway, just invisible and not written on the page. I remember I had a very nice experience of playing with Thomas Morgan a bit more in recent years, and he's unbelievable for that. Like he's like the Matrix. He kind of sees it, all the numbers that you don't see in normal life. You can kind of see how all these melodies connect and what the inferred chord most likely is and what another version could be and what some weirder versions of it are. You can see all the possibilities, and he's like on the knife edge all the time of where he thinks that you're going and where he wants to go in terms of harmony. Well, in everything actually, in every department. But if we're talking harmony, so he knows where you're heading before you know where it is already, just by the way that you're playing a phrase or the way that you're playing into a chord at the start of your phrase. So if you're playing with people at that level, often you don't need to like lock it down as a chord symbol, or it can be multiple things. You can be fine being like three choices. Like that melody in the B section, it's like we're not sure what to call it, so just don't call it anything. And like that mean that if you play it one time, if you play off of the melody one time, it'll be different maybe than the way I play off it, because I'm thinking of it as a different pattern or root note than you are, kind of thing. And that's beautiful. I think the only problem with that is if you want to control it and it to be the same more times in a row, in terms of your composition I'm talking about. If you want it to be people to play it the same way that you hear it, then you lock that down. But if you're not and you don't care and that's part of the fun of it, then you don't need to always.
And do you feel like when I'm coaching students, and I'm coaching myself too, because I'm kind of a control freak, and so, letting some things out of my control it's a stressful thing.
Yeah.
And so I guess one question is like about dissonance and fear. I think when people who are not used to playing in the cracks, start playing in the cracks, there's just a lot of fear of what if everything comes out dissonant, or what if I play this just terrible sounding note? And I know that part of it is about recontextualizing, like, and thinking, like in your third bar of the solo, that is like, that F, which in so many other contexts would be like, no, don't end your phrase there. Keep going, resolve. Like, is it somewhat of just a philosophical recontextualizing of that's not bad or that's not too dissonant? That's part of the sound. I'm not sure I've articulated a question.
No, you have. No, you articulated it great. I think it's like both. I think it's a mixture of many things, but definitely two things that stick out in my head, which is one, like, recontextualizing it and about like what do you think is good or not, and whether it's important that it's good or not. I mean, that sounds like a weird thing to say, but like, is it interesting and is it present, and it's the choice that you made in that moment, and it's gone. And of course, you can. That's being. If you're consistently not happy with the choices that you're making, then you have to go to the practice room and like make some other adjustments. But in terms of the delivery end of things, then and if you're searching, then you have to get used to the sound of searching and be okay with it. To be, if you know what I mean, like. Like, I think I like the sound of searching. I like music that sounds like that, where it's not like bulletproof good all the the or it's like,
I got it, I'm gonna show off what I can do.
I mean, I love that too, of course, but and the sound of searching can sound, of course, a million different ways and multi-layered, and like Coltrane Quartet is searching, but at the same time very together, but also searching in a way, like it's all relative to your own normal, to your consistent kind of concept of language, and it becomes very hard to kind of say what's good and bad by that. That's something I got from playing free music, from playing freely improvised music more often, was taking this kind of weight of it needing to be good on paper or to land in a particular way, but it's more just the best stuff is always the stuff that you really meant in that moment. And if the thing that you really meant just doesn't sound that great, that's just the price that you pay for being really present and committing to the music, and it's worth it, like every time. That's like one thing, but at the same time, like that's like the playing end, as I said, but the practice end is like trying to be as thorough with the things, trying to be as thorough as you can with the things that you don't mind controlling a little bit, which is like, if I'm looking at that, you pointed out that F natural.
Yeah.
And like, I do it as a staccato because I'm very deliberately kind of being a bit out. So
There's no question it's intentional.
yeah. No. I didn't mean that, but
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
I the way that I deliver it is also like it's a sort of aware of itself in some
absolutely.
way, I guess. The shape of the phrase, ba-ba-da-da-do-dee-do, is like a kind of ba-ba-da-do-dee-do, be-bo. If it carried on, it would go ba-ba-da-da-do-dee-do-dee-do-dee-do-dee-do. It's a country motion-ish kind of idea, I guess. So exactly, yeah.
That kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess in that moment, I'm thinking like, well, that's a thing, like, and that's enough. Like the fact that it's like, you know, and that's definitely a freedom of the fingers thing. That's just like the idea that that's like the rest of the phrase isn't even played because it's just sort of suggested by the beginning of it. Then I'm like, that's enough. Then I've kind of left out the justification for that part, if you know what I mean. So then I feel like good about maybe I'm not expressing it well, but if that phrase were to continue with that country motion, then it would be very obvious what my idea is to the listener. You know what I mean? But I sort of cut it off,
Kind of disguising it a little bit.
or just being like, oh yeah, I mean, that's enough of that. It doesn't need to justify itself as a choice. I guess that's what I mean.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know how to say it without. I'm not actually really sure what I'm saying, but I think I'm okay. I'm okay with it, like just being a weird choice sometimes.
Well, it feels very conversational. You know, like there's kind of this tossing off, cutting off. Like it's a little dry.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's. I guess I'm always trying to think with these lines, whether they be in the right hand or left hand. But if there was no left hand accompaniment, would it still stand up as like a melody in itself, or does it need the left hand to justify it? And then when you start breaking away that idea of having to justify leading with your right rather than with your left, so the idea that you can lead even as far to go outside of the chord with your right, then and that if you were not to play the right hand, and if there was actually no other context than just that single line, that it would still stand strong, which is then becomes just about like the shape of the melody and the intention and how groupings of phrases like that's a 3 kind of grouping of phrasing, which is often what I group in. I became aware of horribly recently that's a thing.
By that you mean like there's one phrase here, one phrase here, and then a longer phrase there? Like, is that what you mean by the group of 3 phrases? No.
That too, actually. But I was actually thinking that first line of the first 2 bars, and then like a shorter one, and then a second shorter one.
Like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is like conditioned in me. I'm trying to break that. I went through a period of trying to just phrase in 5 groupings and things like that, but it's really hard. That's really like opening gesture, which is always a bit longer, answering gesture, and then closing gesture, which is somehow linked to that middle gesture. That's like compositionally hardwired in my head, as well as other groupings of 3 gestures, like opening gesture, self-referencing second gesture, and then longer closing gesture. They're all like compositional forms that find their way into the way that you phrase in some way.
Right, but like it's funny because if I want to get like overly analytical, I could see the connection between these phrases with the C sharp, and then these phrases both end on that F. Like they have that F in common. Here, I'll make it bigger for you. I can see you.
Maybe
that's just coincidence, but
I think that
as long as we're overanalyzing here.
But I think it's also to do with the hand shape, right? The hand position. That's what's also dictating that. It's like, if that's is that going to be my thumb? Yeah, the F is my thumb. So again, like that's like I'm leaning into the bass, like even the way that I'm feeling the pattern in the hand. and then I start the second phrase on the same note that I finished. Again, probably a pattern thing. Like you could load them up into that way. So I guess the trade-off that I did.
Just for our,
I was going to say, just for listeners, let me play this because they probably can't imagine it in their head, so that they can just kind of hear what this sounds like together. And it's funny, I find it really funny based on how chromatic it gets, that you start with this pentatonic scale, like really clear clarion call, just a pentatonic scale. It seems like it's going to go in a really different direction. And then I love it. It's got like a little bit of bluesiness
Exactly.
in it, in a funny way. One of the things that I hear you saying, just trying to put a couple things together for people watching, and tell me if you think this is true, is that as scales, arpeggios, consonants, bebop language, whatever, get less important, other things like contour, shape of lines, like articulation, like phrasing, I don't think I've ever thought about my phrasing as deeply as as you're talking about, thinking about your groups of 3 and then trying to play groups of 5, tactile elements, which of course is going to be related to contour and shape of phrase. Like those just grow in importance because you're thinking less, or to the degree that you're thinking, you're focused less on A major, B major, A major, B major, or whatever sorts of scales, and tension and release. And so you're thinking more, or you're focused more, you're engaged more on those other levels. And I think also just sonics and sound, and making sure you're getting a beautiful, interesting, compelling sound at the instrument. Is that kind of fair?
Definitely, but that's only now. Like I mean, I definitely didn't start like that. Like if I had a student and we were talking about this, it's like that. I think I make these choices because I feel so comfortable playing on the more obvious choices that I'm having more fun, like sliding around and just trying to find my way back in when I really need to, if you know what I mean. When the cadence really needs to be strong, I can choose whether I have the choice to be able to articulate a very diatonic phrase that spells out the choice because I've done a ton of work to do that. So so then when I make the choice not to do that, I feel strong about it because I know it's come from a real choice, like an option, rather than just not knowing what I'm doing. Although, I mean, there are levels within that where I still often don't know what I'm doing, but I definitely practiced like bebop, functional harmony, playing on jazz standards. I mean, I still practice that stuff all the time, and practicing, just trying to be melodically clear about what the sequence is and things like that. I'd probably practice that more than anything else. Practicing things like matrix changes, Coltrane matrix changes, and like countdown and satellite and things like that, and being able to be as melodic as I can, but still spell out the chord like with ruthless efficiency. That's like I practiced that so that when I come into the studio and it's the first take with Norma, which this is, then I don't need to like have that part of my CPU up and running. I can just trust it to be there, and I can start thinking, as you just rightly said, about other stuff, about like what the emotional intention is, also like what's the mood that I'm trying to create. I'm not like, I can switch all the analytical bit of my brain off and just kind of, like when in Star Wars, when sort of, I'm not comparing myself to a Jedi at all. But the idea of like just taking the jump and like just shutting your eyes and just seeing what you've got in that moment, because you prepared so much beforehand on the kind of core tenets of things of harmony, melody, practicing with the metronome, practicing on forms, practicing on sequences, and learning people's phrase endings and phraseology of the greats. So
yeah, like the metaphor that's coming to mind for me is not about Jedis, although that's probably a better one. But I was thinking of like, if you want to write, if you want to write free verse poetry, you should probably like write an iambic pentameter, for like years, learn how to rhyme, really learn how to write in the sonnets and Shakespeare, and then let yourself go and write in free verse. Like,
But
if you haven't done that initial work, like, it's not going to come out. You're going to look like a charlatan.
Well, yeah, it's funny because it'll just come out different, and it's just a choice I made, and it's part of the journey that I came through music. I came from a very structured, very classical thing in the beginning. So for me, the whole journey up to this point is about becoming looser and looser and looser, and accepting more and more risk and chance, and like breaking away things that I've learned, that I've been very grateful to have learned, and still use, of course, all of that stuff all the time. But for me, it was all about like trying to forget some of the deep kind of complexity stuff to feel a bit freer. But that doesn't mean that that's the only way to make like nice choices when trying to play freer music. Of course, there's people that didn't learn loads of stuff about that and just learned different sets of skills, where maybe I'm thinking of people that maybe don't play on chord sequences, but I mean, still definitely jazz musicians, but that don't, or even like drummers that don't play in time. You could use that argument, like, how can you play rubato with any kind of real authority if you can't play like a great backbeat? And I'm sure there's people that say that. I don't believe that, because I don't think it's as simple as that. I don't think it works like that. There aren't these kind of objective quantifiers of what is good or bad. There's like, people are doing work all the time when they're making music, and it might just not be on the same things as you get taught in college as well. So I'm like very much a college musician. I've come through all of that, and now I've got a lot of stuff that I learned through having really great teachers. No other reason than that. And now I'm trying to like make something personal and original with it by peeling back layers of it. But there's plenty of people that come that didn't go to college, that didn't study, and wouldn't be having these kind of conversations, that still have incredibly original and interesting things to say, for sure. I mean, we know that, right? That's I mean, through the history of the music, that's also been the same.
Yeah,
the same. But
sure.
But for me, it's not that. I mean, I've gone through that kind of like that painful kind of trying to work out what kind of musician I am, blah blah blah, and where I feel comfortable and stuff. And I'm definitely come from an analytical thing to start with, and tried to forget it later on.
Great. Well, I've taken up a lot of your time. You've been so generous. This might be a good place to leave it, assuming that anybody's still watching. Other than this beautiful album with Norma called Outpost of Dreams, what are some of maybe your other albums or some places to find you that people should visit?
Check out.
I have a record with Bill Frisell and Andrew Sorrell coming out in October, which is with Church
That's
Organ.
exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. On Red Hook Records, which is with church organ and guitar and percussion.
Oh.
And what else? I have a piano trio called Enemy, and we're releasing a live record in a few months. Just bits and bobs. Always just far too much stuff. But that's this thing with Bill and Andrew is the next big thing, I guess. So
Cool. Well, thank you so much for spending all
Thank
the
you.
time and
Very nice to meet you.
sharing your wisdom. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much to everybody who made it this far, who watched or listened to that whole interview. I had a lot of interesting takeaways that I'm going to be thinking about for a long time. If you enjoyed that, you might actually enjoy some of the things from book 3 of Jazz Piano Fundamentals, where we talk about playing outside of the changes. And actually some things in the last chapter really coincide with some of the things that we talked about in the interview. If you watch this far, I always give a secret word. Let's use Kit's first name. Say something about Kit, K-I-T, whatever it is, in the comments. Thanks again to Kit Downs. I'm putting some links to his website and his albums and projects in the description section. Thanks, everybody.